Have you ever poured your heart into something, only to be told it's nothing special? Sunlight flooded through the wide kitchen window, painting the white marble countertops with a soft golden glow. Outside, the Los Angeles suburb was already stirring, the distant hum of cars, a jogger passing by with a golden retriever, the friendly chatter of neighbors on their way to work. But inside the Park family's cozy townhouse, the world felt paused, suspended around the rhythmic sound of a chef's knife meeting a cutting board. Eveline Park stood at her kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, hands moving with careful precision. She was in her early 30s, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun, strands escaping to frame her focused face. The air was fragrant with ginger, garlic, and the faint sweetness of soy sauce. A stack of recipe cards, some handwritten, others dog-eared from years of use, sat beside her, each marked with sticky notes and penciled-in adjustments. She glanced at the clock, 7:12 a.m. The house was quiet except for the low murmur of Mason's voice drifting from his home office down the hallway. Her husband had an early conference call, and Eveline could hear the familiar rise and fall of technical jargon, occasionally punctuated by Mason's polite laughter. She smiled to herself, picturing him at his desk, shirt neatly pressed, hair slightly rumpled, coffee growing cold beside his keyboard. Today wasn't just another weekday. Mason was about to complete a major project at work, a milestone he'd been working toward for months. Eveline had planned for days, gathering ingredients from their favorite Korean grocery, even texting her mother for tips on getting the perfect balance in her galbi jjim, Mason's favorite braised short ribs. She wanted tonight's dinner to be special, a celebration of both his hard work and their partnership. She moved with quiet determination, brow slightly furrowed as she trimmed scallions and julienned carrots with practiced hands. Every movement was thoughtful, deliberate. She wanted the flavors to sing, the presentation to look effortless, yet elegant. It wasn't just about the food. It was about making Mason feel seen and appreciated. A soft ping from her phone interrupted the silence. Eveline wiped her hands on a striped kitchen towel and checked the screen. Janelle Kim, her next-door neighbor and closest friend, had sent a cheery good morning text, peppered with emojis and a photo of her toddler's latest crayon masterpiece. Eveline smiled, typing back a quick reply, promising to catch up soon. The day drifted by in a series of small, careful preparations. Eveline moved between the kitchen and dining room, setting the table with their best dishes, folding napkins into crisp triangles, arranging a small vase of daisies beside the salt and pepper shakers. She paused at the window, watching a pair of kids race bicycles down the street, the city skyline shimmering in the distance beneath the spring sun. As the afternoon wore on, Mason emerged from his office, Bluetooth headset still clipped to his ear, eyes glued to his laptop screen. He paused in the doorway, offering Eveline a distracted smile. "Hey, Ev, smells amazing in here," he said, barely glancing up before ducking back into his office, phone already pressed to his ear again. Eveline watched him go, her hopeful smile lingering a moment too long before she turned back to her preparation. She was used to Mason's work habits, the constant emails, the late-night calls to colleagues overseas. But today, she hoped he'd notice her efforts. She carefully checked the simmering pot, tasting the sauce and adjusting the seasoning, replaying in her mind the small ways Mason liked his meal. A touch more soy, extra sesame oil, carrots sliced thin, not chunky. The hours slipped by. Eveline filled the townhouse with the comforting aroma of home-cooked food, pausing only to wipe down counters or check her reflection in the hallway mirror. She brushed a bit of flour from her cheek, straightened her blouse, and took a deep breath. Tonight would be perfect. By 6, the table was set, the food arranged in serving bowls that gleamed under the warm overhead light. The galbi jjim glistened, nestled beside bowls of fluffy white rice, kimchi, and sautéed spinach. A small cake, a simple homemade sponge drizzled with persimmon syrup, waited under a glass dome, a sweet surprise for dessert. Eveline lit a single candle at the center of the table, then checked the clock again. 6:15 p.m. Mason's meeting should be ending any minute. She heard his footsteps in the hallway, the soft click of his office door closing, and straightened, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her skirt. Mason entered the dining room, phone finally put away, tie loosened, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He paused, taking in the scene, the carefully set table, the fragrant steam curling from the dishes, Eveline's hopeful eyes. "Wow, you really went all out, huh?" he said, dropping his laptop bag by the door. He offered a tired smile, rubbing his eyes. "Sorry, today was a lot." Eveline's heart fluttered. She pulled out his chair, gesturing for him to sit. "I wanted to make something special for you. Congratulations on finishing that project." Mason sank into his seat, glancing at the spread. He served himself a modest portion, then reached for his phone again, checking a new notification. Eveline watched, hands folded in her lap, as he chewed absently, nodding at a message on his screen. They ate in near silence, the only sound the gentle clink of chopsticks. Eveline searched his face for signs that he noticed the extra effort, the perfectly tender meat, the delicately seasoned broth, the careful arrangement on each plate. After a few minutes, Mason set down his chopsticks, glancing up as if suddenly remembering where he was. "This is good," he said, voice flat with fatigue. "But it's nothing special. Just dinner." The words landed quietly, but with the weight of a stone. Eveline's fingers tightened around her napkin, her smile faltering for just a moment before she recovered, nodding as if in agreement. "Oh, I'm glad you like it," she replied, voice soft, eyes fixed on her untouched plate. Mason didn't notice the change in her tone, already distracted by another email ping. He stood, muttered something about a call he needed to return, and disappeared down the hallway, leaving Eveline alone at the table, candle flickering in the growing dusk. The silence pressed in, heavy and awkward. Eveline stared at the meal she'd poured her heart into, the vibrant colors and careful garnishes now blurred by the sting of disappointment. She forced herself to take a bite, tasting nothing. The townhouse felt suddenly too large, the laughter and footsteps from the street outside a distant world away. Eveline blinked back tears, unwilling to let them fall, and busied herself with clearing the plates, scraping perfectly good food into the trash, wiping down the spotless counters. As she stood at the sink, hands submerged in soapy water, her reflection caught in the darkened window. Her face, usually animated with warmth and quiet humor, now looked tired, the corners of her mouth pulled tight. She wondered if all her efforts, all her planning and care were invisible, if Mason even noticed how much she tried. The evening settled into its usual routine, Mason in his office, Eveline alone in the living room, the TV flickering quietly, her phone buzzing with unread messages. She scrolled through social media, pausing on photos of friends at dinner parties, anniversary celebrations, smiling couples sharing sushi and laughter. She set her phone aside, the ache in her chest growing heavier. Later, as she prepared for bed, Eveline paused in the kitchen doorway, looking once more at the empty table, the single candle now burned halfway down. She reached for her phone and, almost without thinking, opened her video diary app, a habit she'd picked up during the pandemic when days blurred together and small victories needed to be remembered. She tapped record, voice barely above a whisper. "Have you ever spent hours making something, hoping it would mean something to someone, only for them not to see it at all?" she asked, her eyes searching her own reflection on the screen. She ended the recording, unsure if she'd ever watch it again. The question lingered, echoing in the quiet of the sleeping house. What would you do if your efforts went unnoticed? Eveline's hands lingered over the dinner plates long after Mason had retreated to his home office. The echo of his words, "This is nothing special," reverberated between the kitchen walls and the hollow space inside her chest. She ran her finger along the edge of the plate, tracing the untouched grains of rice, the careful garnish that now seemed pointless. The house felt unusually quiet, filled only with the distant rumble of Mason's keyboard and the hum of the refrigerator. She rinsed the dishes one by one, her movements deliberate, as if each plate might reveal an answer. Every detail of the day replayed in her mind, the careful selection of ingredients at the market, the hours she spent chopping, marinating, tasting. She'd even set the table with a fresh cloth and a tiny vase of daisies from the neighbor's garden, all for a single moment of acknowledgement, a moment that never came. Later that night, Eveline stood in the bathroom, brushing her teeth while Mason scrolled on his phone beside her. She glanced at him in the mirror, hoping to catch his eye, hoping for a word, a touch, anything to soften the sting of his indifference. But his brow was furrowed, eyes fixed on an email, oblivious to her silent plea. "Did you have a long day?" she ventured, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded absently, not looking up. "Deadline's tomorrow. Sorry, Evie, I just need to finish this." She swallowed her response and turned off the light, slipping into bed beside him. The space between them felt wider than ever. The next morning, sunlight found Eveline at the kitchen table, listlessly stirring her coffee. The vibrant city outside pressed against the windows with its promise of possibility, but inside, she felt adrift. After Mason left, barely touching the breakfast she'd prepared, she sat alone, her thoughts circling the same invisible drain. Her phone buzzed with a message. "Janelle. Coffee? I could use your company." Eveline hesitated, then typed back, "Meet you at Luna Cafe in 30? She changed into a crisp blouse and jeans, smoothing her hair into a low ponytail. As she stepped outside, the air was warm and full of life. Neighbors chatting over fences, a delivery truck rumbling past, the scent of jasmine from Mrs. Alvarez's garden mixing with fresh bread from the corner bakery. Luna Cafe was only a short walk down the bustling main street. Inside, the place buzzed with energy. Baristas calling out orders, college students hunched over laptops, locals laughing in rapid bursts of English, Spanish, and Korean. Eveline spotted Janelle by the window, waving enthusiastically. Janelle's presence was as comforting as ever, her smile easy and genuine. "You look tired, Evie. Everything okay?" Eveline offered a small smile, but her eyes betrayed her. "It's nothing, really. Just a long week. Come on, I know you better than that." With a sigh, Eveline spilled the story. The dinner, Mason's comment, the silent ache that followed. Janelle listened intently, hands cupped around her latte. "He really said that?" Janelle's brows furrowed in disbelief. "Girl, you spend more time on one meal than most people spend on their whole week's dinners." Eveline shrugged. "Maybe I'm just overreacting. He's tired, work is stressful. It's not like he meant to hurt me." "That doesn't mean your feelings aren't real," Janelle said gently. "You deserve to be appreciated, Evie. You do so much." Eveline stared at her coffee, swirling the spoon. I wonder if any of it matters. If he doesn't even notice, then what am I doing wrong?" Janelle reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're not doing anything wrong, but you can't keep pouring from an empty cup. Maybe you need to do something just for you, you know?" Eveline nodded, her heart heavy but grateful for the support. The cafe's warmth was a balm, but as she walked home, the question lingered. Was she truly invisible in her own home? Determined not to give up, Eveline poured her energy into planning another special dinner. She mapped out a new recipe, a fusion of Korean and Californian flavors, something bold and exciting, and headed to the local grocery store. The aisles were a vibrant mosaic, a family debating kimchi brands, a teenager FaceTiming her mother for a list, an elderly man selecting avocados with practiced care. Eveline moved methodically, selecting the freshest produce, chatting with the friendly cashier about the best time to buy persimmons. For a moment, she felt a flicker of anticipation. Maybe this time, Mason would notice, would really see her. Back home, the kitchen filled with the comforting scent of simmering broth and roasting vegetables. She hummed along to a playlist, her mood lifting as she plated each dish with care. By the time the clock struck 7, everything was ready. The table set, candles lit, food arranged like artwork. But as the minutes ticked by, her excitement gave way to anxiety. She checked her phone. No messages from Mason. She texted him, "Dinner's ready when you get home." It wasn't until nearly 9 that he finally walked through the front door, a tired apology on his lips. "Sorry, Evie. The meeting ran over. I grabbed something with the guys. I'll just shower and go straight to bed, okay?" He barely glanced at the table before disappearing down the hall. Eveline stood motionless, the silence pressing in. The steam from the food curled upward and vanished. She sat at the table alone, staring at the empty chair across from her, fighting back tears. The following afternoon, Eveline took a slow walk around the neighborhood, desperate for a sense of calm. She passed Mrs. Alvarez tending her rose bushes, the elderly woman's sun hat nearly swallowing her tiny frame. "Good afternoon, dear," Mrs. Alvarez called, waving her pruning shears cheerfully. Eveline managed a smile. "Hi, Mrs. Alvarez. Your roses look beautiful, as always." "Oh, thank you. They thrive on a little attention. Sometimes I think they need it more than water." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "You know, people are like that too. Sometimes all we need is to feel seen. Even the smallest gesture can make a person bloom." Eveline's heart squeezed. "That's really lovely." Mrs. Alvarez patted her arm. "Whatever's weighing you down, just remember, what you do matters, whether anyone says so or not. But don't be afraid to ask for what you need, dear. Life's too short for invisible burdens." Eveline nodded, blinking away sudden tears. She thanked Mrs. Alvarez and continued her walk, her steps lighter, but her thoughts swirling. That evening, the house felt emptier than before. Mason was home but present only in body, his mind tethered to spreadsheets and conference calls. Eveline made herself a simple dinner and ate alone, the television murmuring in the background. She tried to start a conversation as he passed through the kitchen. "Did you see the roses outside? Mrs. Alvarez says they're the best they've ever been." Mason paused, glancing up from his phone. "That's great, honey." His tone was kind but distracted, already moving away. Eveline watched him go, frustration tightening her chest. She wanted to scream, to demand his attention, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she finished her meal in silence, the ache of loneliness settling in. Later, she sat at her laptop, scrolling through old photos, smiling faces at picnics, birthday cakes, Mason's arm draped around her shoulders. When had things changed? When had she stopped feeling like she mattered? A message popped up from Janelle. Janelle, thinking about you. Don't forget, you're amazing. Eveline smiled sadly, typing back a thank you. She wished she could believe it. The days blurred together, each one marked by small efforts and quiet disappointments. Eveline continued to cook, to clean, to make their home beautiful. Mason continued to work late, to thank her absently, to disappear into his own world. One afternoon, she stood in the kitchen, a fresh batch of cookies cooling on the counter, and asked herself the question she'd been avoiding. Was any of this making a difference? Did her efforts matter if Mason didn't seem to notice? The house was quiet, the only sound the ticking clock on the wall. Eveline closed her eyes, letting the silence wash over her. If you've ever felt invisible at home, if your efforts have gone unnoticed, you're not alone. Eveline's story is just beginning, and sometimes the first step to being seen is finding the courage to speak up. Have you ever experienced something like this? Share your story in the comments and subscribe to follow Eveline's journey. What happens next might surprise you. Eveline wiped her hands on a dish towel, staring out the window as the sun dipped behind the city skyline. Tomorrow, she promised herself, would be different. But tonight, she let herself feel the weight of being unseen, hoping, somewhere out there, someone would understand. The rain had started early that morning, turning the pavement outside the park's townhouse into a glistening canvas of reflections. Eveline stood by the window, mug of tea cooling in her hands, watching droplets race their way down the glass. The silence inside the house was thick, punctuated only by the distant clatter of Mason's keyboard in the upstairs office. No aroma of simmering broth or browning sesame oil crept from the kitchen today. The countertops, usually cluttered with mixing bowls and recipe books, were immaculate, almost sterile. She had spent the night replaying Mason's words in her mind. This is nothing special. They echoed in every quiet corner, amplifying her doubts. Her passion for cooking, once a source of pride and connection, now felt futile. The air hung heavy with things unsaid. A sharp knock at the door startled her. Eveline set her mug down and opened it to Janelle Kim, her neighbor and confidant, holding a folded umbrella and sporting her usual infectious grin. "Hey, I was just in the area and thought maybe you'd want to get out for a bit." Janelle's eyes flickered to Eveline's face, reading the exhaustion in her features. "Or we could just talk." Reluctance wavered in Eveline's voice. "I don't know, Janelle. I'm just tired." Janelle stepped inside, closing the door against the chill. "Eveline, you've been cooped up all week. When's the last time you did something for yourself?" She cast a glance at the pristine kitchen, as if searching for signs of the woman who once delighted in culinary experiments. "There's a community cooking class at the rec center tonight. I'm going, and I want you to come." Eveline hesitated. "I haven't cooked for anyone but Mason in years. What if I'm just not that special?" Janelle reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You are. Come on. If nothing else, you'll get out of the house." By evening, the rain had tapered to a mist. Eveline found herself standing outside the Highland Community Center, heart bouncing in her chest. The building buzzed with energy. Laughter spilled from the gym. The faint sound of music drifted from a dance studio down the hall. She smoothed her sweater and followed Janelle to the kitchen classroom. Inside, a cluster of strangers in aprons gathered around a broad stainless steel island. The instructor, a grandmotherly woman named Ms. Patel, welcomed everyone with a warm smile. "Tonight, we're making family comfort food. Dishes that remind you of home." Eveline's hands trembled as she tied her apron. She glanced around, an older man with weathered hands, a young woman with a shy smile, a mother and teenage son bickering over the best way to chop onions. As the session began, the air filled with the sizzle of onions, the fragrance of spices, and laughter that cut through her anxiety. Ms. Patel moved from station to station, offering advice. When she reached Eveline, she peered into her pot and said, "You cook like someone who cares very deeply." Eveline's eyes welled with tears she hadn't realized she was holding back. "I'm just not sure it matters," she whispered. Ms. Patel smiled, a knowing glint in her eye. "It always matters, especially when you think it doesn't." As the class continued, Eveline relaxed. She swapped stories with a retired nurse named Maria about their grandmother's secret recipes. She listened to a young father share how cooking had helped him reconnect with his daughter after a divorce. The hum of shared experience, the validation from strangers, began to fill the empty places left by Mason's careless words. Meanwhile, across town, Mason sat hunched at his desk. The rain's rhythm on the window was now joined by the thud of his own heartbeat. For days, he'd noticed the change. No more elaborate breakfasts, no gentle reminders about taking an umbrella, no quiet presence in the evenings. Eveline's absence felt more profound than any silence. He wandered downstairs and found the kitchen spotless. On the counter, a closed notebook caught his eye, its soft blue cover etched with tiny cherry blossoms. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside, Eveline's neat handwriting filled the pages. Recipes, grocery lists, notes to herself. His eyes landed on a page, half filled, the ink smudged where a tear had fallen. If home isn't special, what am I doing wrong? The words struck him like a physical blow. He could picture her, sitting at the kitchen table late at night, pouring her worries into paper because she couldn't pour them into him. Guilt twisted in his chest. He thought of all the small gestures, the meals, the notes, the warmth he'd come to expect, and dismissed as routine. Each one, he realized, was a love letter he'd left unread. A sudden knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. Mrs. Alvarez, the elderly neighbor, stood on the porch, clutching a box of lemons from her backyard tree. "Evening, Mason," she said, her voice soft. "Are you all right? Haven't seen Eveline around much." He managed a weak smile. "She's out tonight. I think I messed up, Mrs. Alvarez." She studied him for a moment, the lines in her face deepening with concern. "You know, my late husband never noticed when I switched up the recipes, but he always noticed when I stopped trying. Sometimes it's not about the food, it's about being seen." Her words echoed through him long after she left. Mason wandered the silent house, each room holding echoes of conversations, laughter, and the gentle warmth he now realized he'd been taking for granted. Back at the community center, the class was winding down. Plates of steaming food lined the counter, the air rich with the scent of garlic and herbs. Ms. Patel invited everyone to share their dishes and stories. Eveline, cheeks flushed, lifted her bowl. "This is kimchi jjigae, a stew my mother taught me. She always said that food is how we show love, even when we can't find the words." The group nodded, some smiling, some wiping away tears. "For a while I forgot why I loved cooking, but tonight reminded me, it's not about perfection, it's about connection." As laughter and conversation filled the room, Eveline felt lighter than she had in weeks. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mason. "Can we talk when you get home?" She stared at the message, heart thudding. The ride home with Janelle was quiet, rain trailing across the windshield, city lights blurring in the mist. Janelle reached over, giving Eveline's hand a reassuring squeeze. "You did something brave tonight," she said. "Don't forget that." Mason was waiting in the living room, hands twisting nervously. When Eveline entered, he stood abruptly. I found your notebook," he began, voice trembling. "The page where you asked if home isn't special, what you're doing wrong." He stepped closer, regret etched deep in his expression. "Eveline, you're not doing anything wrong. I am. I've been so caught up in work and stress that I stopped seeing everything you do. I took you for granted, and I'm sorry." Tears slipped down Eveline's cheeks, but she didn't turn away. "It hurt, Mason. When you said my cooking was nothing special, it felt like I wasn't special. Not just the food." He reached for her hands, holding them tightly. "You are special. More than I can say. I never told you enough. I know now how much I hurt you. I want to make it right." The silence between them was different now, no longer heavy with pain, but fragile with hope. Mason swallowed, voice barely above a whisper. "Will you let me try?" Eveline nodded, a single tear landing on their joined hands. "We have to try. Together." As the rain finally stopped outside, the park's home filled with the tentative promise of healing, a chance to rebuild, to see and be seen. And for the first time in weeks, the kitchen didn't feel empty. Will Mason be able to fix what he broke? Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe to find out how their story ends. Mason stood by the entryway, fidgeting with the edge of his phone, the late afternoon sunlight painting warm rectangles across the living room floor. The house was unusually quiet. No clatter from the kitchen, no humming of tunes, no aroma of anything simmering on the stove. He had left work a little early, driven by a restless feeling he couldn't name, and now he stood there, rehearsing words in his head that all sounded inadequate. When the door finally clicked open, Eveline stepped inside, tote bag from the community center slung over her shoulder. Her cheeks were flushed from the brisk walk home, her eyes tired but more focused than they had been in weeks. She paused in surprise at seeing Mason waiting for her, not lost in his laptop, not on a call, simply present. He managed a nervous smile. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" Eveline's hand tightened on her bag strap, her posture guarded. She nodded and set the bag down, the quiet between them filled with all the things left unsaid. Mason gestured to the couch. "Please, just sit with me." She sat, smoothing her skirt, not quite meeting his eyes. He drew in a breath. I found your note, the one on your desk. His voice was gentle, remorseful. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. He hesitated, searching her face for a flicker of response. I've been so wrapped up in work, I stopped seeing what matters most. Eveline looked away, blinking fast. It's not just about dinner, Mason. I wanted you to see me. Not just the food on your plate, but everything I put into making this a home. He nodded, swallowing. I know, and I'm sorry. I never wanted you to feel invisible. His hands twisted together. When Mrs. Alvarez mentioned how lucky I was, I realized I'd been taking everything for granted. You, especially. He paused. I want to change that. I want to be better. Eveline studied him, the tension in her shoulders softening a little. I joined a cooking class, she said quietly. At first, it was to distract myself, but then I met people, other women, who felt the same way I did. I realized I don't need to prove my worth to anyone, not even you. Mason's eyes glistened with regret, but also admiration. I'm proud of you, he said. Really? He reached for her hand, tentative, as if asking permission. She let him take it. I've been thinking about how I show appreciation, he continued. I want to do better. Not just say thank you, but actually be present. Listen, share things with you, not just expect you to take care of everything. Eveline's lips curled in a small, bittersweet smile. I don't expect you to say the perfect thing every time, but I do need to feel like what I do matters, even if it's just a little. He squeezed her hand gently. It matters. You matter. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. A quiet understanding settled between them, the kind that comes not from grand gestures, but from honest words and vulnerability. For the first time in weeks, Eveline felt the weight in her chest begin to lift. That weekend, Mason insisted on planning dinner himself. Eveline watched from the kitchen island as he fumbled with recipe cards, asking questions about measurements and spices, laughing at his own mistakes. The room filled with the sizzle of vegetables, the scent of toasted sesame oil, and, most importantly, the sound of their voices mingling, sharing, rebuilding. Halfway through, Mason stopped and turned to her, a sheepish grin on his face. I have a new appreciation for how much work you put into this, he admitted, holding up a slightly charred scallion pancake. How did you make this look so easy? Eveline laughed, the sound light and genuine. Years of practice, and a lot of patience. They sat down together at the small dining table, plates piled with Mason's earnest attempts. He raised his glass, to not taking things for granted, and to learning, one meal at a time. She clinked her glass to his, warmth blooming through her. The food wasn't perfect, but the effort was, and that was enough. Life didn't magically become flawless after that. Mason still had stressful days, and Eveline still struggled sometimes with feeling seen. But they talked, really talked, more often. Small gestures replaced old habits. Mason leaving notes of gratitude on the fridge, Eveline inviting him to help plan meals, both making time for walks together in the neighborhood park. Janelle noticed the change, teasing Eveline at the cafe one afternoon. You look lighter, she said with a wink, like someone who finally got through to her stubborn husband. Eveline grinned, stirring her coffee. I realized I needed to get through to myself first. I can't control what other people see, but I can decide what I do with my own passion. Mrs. Alvarez, ever the wise observer, caught Eveline in the hallway a few days later. You know, mija, sometimes people forget to say thank you. Not because they don't care, but because they don't realize what's missing until it's gone. Eveline smiled, understanding now what she hadn't before. He's learning. We both are. Mrs. Alvarez nodded approvingly. That's all anyone can ask. Months passed, and the park's home took on a new rhythm. Eveline's cooking became something she did for herself as much as for Mason, sometimes elaborate, sometimes simple, always infused with her personality. Mason, for his part, made a point to be present, to ask questions, to offer real appreciation, not just for the meals, but for the laughter, the effort, the partnership. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Mason reached across the table and took Eveline's hand. You know, he said, home always felt comfortable, but now it feels special. Eveline squeezed his hand, a contentment settling in her chest that went deeper than any fleeting compliment. Maybe that's because we both decided to make it that way. If you've ever felt like your efforts go unnoticed, or like you're pouring your heart into something only to be met with indifference, Eveline's story is for you. Sometimes the people closest to us genuinely don't see what we give, until we find the courage to speak up, to show up for ourselves, and to invite them to do the same. What about you? Have you ever felt invisible at home or in your relationships? How did you find your voice, or are you still searching for it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else feel seen. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button. It lets us know you want more real stories like this one. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss a new episode about everyday lives, honest confessions, and the small moments that truly matter. Thank you for spending this time with us. Remember, your efforts are never nothing special. They are the ingredients that make your story and your home uniquely yours. Until next time.